So let's get into today's actual topic, which is Everlane is sold to SHEIN, Allbirds, closed its US stores. So I think the question a lot of us have on our minds is sustainable fashion in trouble? Is it in crisis? So let's get into it. So over the last few weeks, well, actually months, I think Allbirds made an announcement earlier this year that it was closing its stores. And Everlane, one of the original ethical fashion brands, was acquired by SHEIN. And these two major stories have sent shockwaves throughout the sustainable fashion community, as we all can imagine. And on their own, they might seem like isolated business decisions, but together they do raise a much bigger question. And that is, is sustainable fashion facing a turning point? So today, I want to talk about why these stories matter and what they reveal about the state of the industry, and what conscious consumers should be paying attention to next. So, first, let's talk about the Allbirds situation. As reported by Forbes, Allbirds became one of the most recognizable sustainable fashion footwear brands in the world. They had a very clear identity, they had strong brand recognition, and successfully introduced many consumers to the idea that sustainability and mainstream fashion could coexist. And so when we hear about store closures, it catches attention. But what's interesting to me is that this isn't happening in isolation. Smaller, sustainable brands have quietly struggled, and some of them have downsized. Some of them have moved to online only operations. Others have closed entirely, like the Nude label, which I am so upset about. Like, wow. One of the best underwear brands out there, like, no longer exists, and it makes me so sad. But the difference is that many of these stories never received the same level of media attention, and that's because they weren't that big of a name in the industry. And so now we're seeing some of these same challenges of higher manufacturing and material costs affecting brands that were once considered success stories. And I think that should make us pause. So that brings us to the Everlane acquisition. And that was pretty recent. If you've been around sustainable fashion for a while, Everlane was one of the brands that helped introduce ethical fashion to mainstream consumers. They built their reputation around the idea of radical transparency. Their marketing focused on showing customers how much products cost to make, how much they were marked up, and why they believed their pricing was fair. And so, as reported here by Business of Fashion, recently Shein acquired Everlane, and it just really shot Everlane in the foot, I believe. The reason why I say that is because over time, Everlane became a gateway brand for many people who were trying to move away from fast fashion. And for years, they were especially known for basics like denim and capsule wardrobe staples. That's why I loved them. And it's kind of funny now to think about all the Everlane pieces I have being vintage Everlane, because now I am not going to be shopping them anymore. I am going to have to boycott and wait to see what happens as this Shein takeover um, plays out. And I know there are some of you out there who are like that as well, and who are going to boycott until you see what happens. But if you followed the brand closely, you've probably noticed that consumers have been questioning product quality in recent years, including myself. We do have a story on forconsciousconsumers.com about their activewear, probably 4 years ago now, and we shared how the quality just wasn't there. But that's just one instance. Where we've seen the quality of Everlane decline. And honestly, that's one reason why this acquisition didn't really or completely surprise me. When a company gets acquired, consumers, we start to naturally wonder, like, will the quality change? Will the mission change? Will the values that built the brand survive? And these are the same questions that people ask whenever a beloved niche brand is purchased by a much larger corporation. Like, think about how in the Black community, when we see an independent Black business sharing hair products or strictly for certain, Black hair and certain curl patterns get acquired by a larger business, we start to wonder, like, okay, is this going to start to become a whitewashed brand now? Are we going to see the rise of, for all hair types type of language? The concern isn't necessarily the acquisition itself, it's more of what happens afterward. This matters to me more so beyond Everlane, because I know many people in the sustainable fashion community are trying to focus on the silver lining, which is that the sustainable fashion movement is about more than one brand. And I agree with part of that perspective. No single brand represents the entire movement, and sustainable fashion has existed before Everlane and it'll exist after Everlane. But I also think that it's important to acknowledge Everlane's role in shaping the industry. They were one of the companies that helped bring ethical fashion into mainstream conversations. And that's why this moment feels so significant. And my biggest concern isn't simply what happens to Everlane, it's what this acquisition could signal for the industry as a whole. I ain't gonna lie, you know what I'm saying? If major fast fashion companies begin acquiring sustainable fashion brands and they start gaining credibility that took these brands years, sometimes decades to build, like, I am going to be frustrated. And that's where questions about greenwashing and fair washing become even more important. My thing is are we going to see more fast fashion brands acquire sustainable brands, and will sustainability become a meaningful commitment, or will it become another marketing strategy? Only time will tell. So the bigger problem I am seeing is, I think both stories point to a larger issue, and it's really that the consumer has changed. 5 or 10 years ago, many consumers were primarily motivated by a brand's mission. People wanted to know where the products were made, who made them, how the workers were treated, and whether brands aligned with their values. But these questions still matter. But today, consumers are facing a very different economic reality. Many households are dealing with higher costs, tighter budgets, and more financial uncertainty. Um, Cue the live that I did. But as a result, value matters more than ever. And that's where many sustainable brands are struggling. Even consumers who do care about ethics, they often have to make practical purchasing decisions. And a brand's mission may inspire someone, but inspiration alone at this point doesn't always justify paying 2 to 3 times more for a product. So I do think it's something that we've also talked about on the Substack, which is, is sustainable fashion waging war against the working class. So if you're interested in our thoughts on that, please go check that out. We talk about the pricing of sustainable fashion continuing to skyrocket and whether or not it's becoming just a classist symbol at this point. But what I am noticing and what I'm not really seeing other people talk about is how much sustainable brands are struggling to adjust to the changing consumer needs. So, what can sustainable brands do now? I don't think that this is the downfall of sustainable fashion. Far from it, actually. I think we're entering a period of adaptation, and consumers still care about sustainability, but they want more than the good story. They want value, they want transparency, and increasingly, they want proof. So, if a brand claims it's ethical, consumers want receipts. I think it's going to be really hard for brands like SHEIN who know nothing about sustainability, but maybe have engaged in some light greenwashing. They are going to get a culture shock when they jump in, full force deep into the waters of sustainable fashion and they realize that they have to uphold certification. They have to make impact reports, and it's not going to be as easy to just say, "Oh, we're sustainable," buy our product. So they're gonna be in for a rude awakening if they think that's what's gonna happen because now they've acquired Everlane. If a brand claims it's sustainable, consumers want evidence of that. And if a brand claims it's improving worker conditions, consumers, we want reporting and accountability. There needs to be a full page on your website about your factories, what they're doing, how they're keeping workers safe, if they're getting fair wages, can we see the workers? Can we see the condition of the factory? This era of making broad claims without backing them up is coming to an end. And honestly, it's a good thing. I think it's going to weed out the Sheins. So if they're able to hold on, are they going to adapt and do the right thing? Or are they going to be like, oh, we kind of made a mistake here. We flubbed up? So the brands that survive will likely be the ones that combine sustainability with affordability, transparency, quality, and convenience, to be honest. So the Everlane acquisition and the Allbirds store closures may look like separate news stories, but I think they're connected. Both reveal how difficult it has become for brands to grow, compete, and remain financially viable in today's economy. But the movement itself isn't disappearing. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to the business model needs to evolve. And I'm curious as to what you think. Are these isolated incidents or are they signs of a larger shift happening within sustainable fashion? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more analysis on ethical fashion, greenwashing, consumer trends, and sustainable brands, make sure you're subscribed to For Conscious Consumers, this channel here, and join us on our Substack. That is that on that. So thank you all for being here. Just so grateful for any time we get to spend here together. So until the next one, take care of yourselves, others, and the planet. Bye.